Generic intro, songs and words, pumped up gaming, generic intro. What is up, guys? So, week 3. We've made it to week 3 and gotten about a total of 300 viewers. Yeah. We are huge, man. You might as well call me Miley Cyrus, and this is Dolly frickin' Parton, bro.
Waves.
Huge assets to the Magic the Gathering community. This week, Justin's going to take the reins, and we're going to go over
Your favorite deck.
my favorite deck to play against.
Yeah.
Just the best, funnest, ancestral dog shit bullshit.
Yeah, how many times have you lost to it?
Just about as many times as you've lost to Newmont. Tell us what we're going to be seeing today.
So we're going to be going over my Animar, Soul of the Elements. We'll do a sweet little cut to that.
Yeah, I've gotten super better at editing. Did you guys see all the cool little words that I added in the last one? Dude, I might as well work for Google. Oh man, I might be able to hack the internet.
Oh god. Can you cut this?
So my biggest critiques from the last video that we did was, including from my glorious co-host here, was that it was 51 minutes long. This one, I got you. It'll be about 35 minutes tops.
Because it's not about Dakota. So here we're going to just go over the basic layout of the deck. We have it sorted here on the mana curve. You can see that this is not your regular mana curve. We kind of hit the 5 mark and just spike from there. And we'll get into why this mana curve is ridiculous, but let's just say I don't really care about the colorless cost of creatures.
Because it's Animar.
Because it's Animar. First card, of course, is Ancient Tomb. Remember, with any kind of competitive deck, you want to use your life points as a resource. So this is quick mana, really quick, and so that's what you want, to get big stuff out as quick as possible. So we have Mana Crypt, Rootbound Crag. We run a lot of basics. It's not going to be a problem to bring it in untapped. Next, we have Command Tower, essential to any commander deck. Alright, we have my Shocklands. I'm still missing one, but we have Breeding Pool. We have Temple of the False Gods for that mid to late game mana ramp. We have Hinterland Harbor. Again, not difficult to bring in untapped. Reliquary Tower, I can get a really big hand in this deck, and so having no maximum hand size is extremely important. Then here's our other Shocklands, Steam Vents. And then Opal Palace. This is actually really, really good in Animar. If you bring Animar out a bit later and you need to get counters on him quick, this is for 4 mana, you can just bring him in with a +1/+1 counter. Then we have our fetch lands. We have Misty Rainforest, Windswept Heath, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, Scalding Tarn. And my favorite, Myriad Landscape. It's a bit slower, but you bring out 2 basics, which is really nice. I put it in all of my decks. Then we have Wooded Foothills. So we have 9 forests, 5 mountains, and 6 islands. So that brings us to a grand total of 36 lands for this deck. We run Lotus Petal. We run a Mana Crypt and a Soul Ring. Those are your quick drops. For mana fixing, we have Chromatic Lantern.
3-color always wants Chromatic Lantern.
Yeah. Thrawn Dynamo is fairly easy to get out, especially with Soul Ring and Mana Crypt. And then Gilded Lotus just is a solid rock. Alright, going into artifacts, we have Sensei's Divining Top. It has pay 1, 1 drop, look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them back in any order, and then you can tap it, draw a card, then put Sensei's Divining Top on top of its owner's library. Great card for filtering. You can pretty much rearrange the top 3 cards in any order.
I think
use
it's a staple
all the
in any
time.
commander
Yeah,
deck.
use it all the time for getting lands if you need lands. If you're flooded with lands and you don't need any more lands, you can grab answers. Aside from that, it's very hard to get rid of. If anybody tries to wipe your artifacts, you can tap it at instant speed and put it on top of your library. Staple in any commander deck. We have Scroll Rack. Again, perfect for hand fixing. Basically, it's a really good way to dig deeper into your deck. Lightning Greaves. Equipped creature has haste and shroud. Best equipment in the game. Should go in every single commander deck. 0 to equip. It's protection, it's haste. Cloudstone Curio. This is a staple in this deck. Whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. This means if you play a creature, you can then return another creature to your hand. With Animar, I run a lot of really big colorless creatures, aka the Eldrazi. So, with Animar in play with a bunch of 1/1 counters, with Cloudstone Curio down, you can pretty much free cast an Eldrazi, bounce another Eldrazi to your hand, free cast the Eldrazi, bounce the other Eldrazi to your hand. There's a lot of creatures that I have. You can exile somebody's library completely this way, exile all other permanents on the board this way, draw your entire library if you want. It's very, very useful and probably the MVP of this deck.
And the biggest target.
Paradox Engine. So whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. Yeah. Just
enough
yeah.
said.
I run a lot of rocks. That untaps the rocks. I run Cryptolith Rite, which gives all creatures the ability to tap for mana. This thing is boss for breaking this deck. Then Akroma's Memorial. This is a 7-drop, so very expensive, but creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, and then they become pro black and red. So it gives Animar 1 more protection, and it gives everything haste, vigilance, and trample. So this pretty much will win you the game when in play with a lot of creatures.
Perfect.
Alright, now going into enchantments. We run Burgeoning just because the tempo you can get in a 4-man pod with Burgeoning is insane. The fact that in the first round you could potentially have 4 lands by round 2, that's huge, especially when you're trying to get Animar down as soon as possible.
More competitive pods, that's just... Burgeoning is a must if you're trying to get more competitive.
Exactly. Then we run Hardened Scales, another auto-include in any Animar deck. Basically, anytime you add a counter to Animar, you add 2 counters.
Hey, look, it's the same thing that was in Mazarek.
Yeah. We have Cryptolith Rite. This gives your creatures the ability to tap for mana. Interacts really, really well with Paradox Engine. Plus, your creatures become dorks, so that helps.
1 mana of any color, folks. Go get you one.
Impact Tremor. This is a win con. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremor deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Non-combat damage, win con.
With the Cloudstone Curio combo that we talked about, you can win with Impact Tremors in play just by recasting a bunch of stuff over and over again in an infinite loop. Kill everybody else that way. We also have Ancestral Statue, which we'll get into when we get to the creatures. But this is clutch. We run Simic Ascendancy. Again, since the whole point of Animar is to get 1/1 counters on him as soon as possible, Simic Ascendancy has a 3 cost, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, so you can use it to ramp up Animar. Aside from that, whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature you control. Put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. It's not an instant win, but it's definitely forcing the hand of somebody at the table to deal with it, or you win the game.
And an awesome thing, too, is that's not a tap ability, that mana cost ability. So if you have the mana for it, you can just pump the shit out of it. And those counters don't go away.
Exactly. Any deck that touches blue should run Heuristic Study. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1.
Would you like to pay 1?
You can always count, especially if you can get this out early, on people just letting you draw.
Hey, would you like to pay 1 for that?
Yeah. All right, then we have Temur Ascendancy. This is an expensive enchantment for haste, but the fact that it also brings with it whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. It gives you card draw as well. So this, again, is super important aside from the haste, but it lets you draw deeper into your deck. Leyline of Anticipation. This is ideally in your opening hand, so that on somebody's end step you could play Simic Ascendancy and Ancestral Statue and get Animar to 20 before your turn starts and just win the game. It's fantastic. We run Doubling Season, of course. We have 3 Planeswalkers. We have Animar. We have several Hydras. This just endless value from this card. Super important. And then last but not least, this is really just in case you're getting to that late game and you just need to play a lot of heavy stuff. It doubles your mana and also brings card draw to the table.
At Zendikar Resurgence?
Yeah, Zendikar Resurgence. Alright, I run next to no instants and sorceries in this deck. It is mostly creatures. The ones I do have are for fetching creatures and situations. So, of course, we run tutors. So the first one's Worldly Tutor. Search for a creature, put it on top. Cyclonic Rift. Again, answer. It's fairly easy to overload this, especially mid-game if people are shutting you down. Fabricate. You can use it to search for either Cloudstone Curio or Ancestral Statue. And then Traverse the Wilds. Pretty easy to get big creatures out in this deck, and this is the main reason why I run so many basics, is because you can flood the board with a ton of lands.
Yeah. And a big thing with Fabricate, if you're running Fabricate just to scoop up your Soul Ring or your Mana Crypt or something like that, get rid of Fabricate. It's an empty slot that you could be using for something better, in my opinion. What do you think?
I just run it for Ancestral Statue or Cloudstone Curio.
Yeah. Those are your win cons.
That's why I run it.
Yeah, exactly.
You run tutors to tutor for win cons.
Yeah, and I've seen people with Fabricate, and they'll just use Fabricate to tutor up freaking Soul Ring or Mana Crypt or something.
Do they win the game?
No.
Well, there you go. Alright, I run 3 Planeswalkers in this deck. We have Xenagos the Reveler. His +1 is you can add X mana in any combination of red and green, where X is the number of creatures you control. He can create 2/2 red-green satyrs, and his big finale is his -6, where he exiles the top 7 cards of your library. You may put any number of creatures and or land cards from among them onto the battlefield. More importantly, his ult is -6 and he starts with 3, which means if you have Doubling Season in play, when you play him, you can immediately ult, which is the goal with these Planeswalkers. Yeah. He's super useful, A, because you can use him as a mana dork, and B, because you can get essentially 7 permanents. This deck mostly runs creatures and lands, so you're really not risking a whole lot when you ult him. We have Jace. I use him mostly for his +1 ability, which is Scry 1 then Draw. His -2 also is extremely useful. Return target creature to its owner's hand. and his -8 just helps lock the board down a bit more, creating an emblem. Whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. Again, he starts with 5 loyalty counters, which means if doubling season is in play, you can immediately ult him. Now for my favorite planeswalker of all time, Garruk, Caller of Beasts. He is super handy. His +1, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on bottom in any order. Oh my god, in a creature deck, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It filters your deck and at least gets you closer to creatures if you don't draw any creatures. And then his -3, you may just put a green creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. This does not trigger Animar, but it still gets potentially a really big creature onto the battlefield. Then, of course, he starts with 4 loyalty counters, so if you have doubling season, you can immediately ult him. His emblem is insane. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Basically, cast a creature, tutor a creature. It's ridiculous. These 3 are powerhouses, and I love running them in this deck. Alright, so now for all the creatures. So we're going to start with the cheaper ones, the mana dorks, and then we'll kind of get into more why I have the creatures that I have. So the first is Birds of Paradise. Play him turn 1, he can tap for any color, so he's essential for getting Animar out turn 2. Bloom Tender, super useful. You can play him turn 2, then play Animar turn 3, and then on turn 3, instead of having 3 mana, you then gain 6 mana because he taps for each color among permanents you control. Since Animar is 3 colors, he taps Bloom Tender, then taps for 3 mana. Sakura Tribe Elder, super useful for mana fixing. Sack him, search for a basic land, put it into the battlefield tapped. Coiling Oracle, when combined with either Scroll Rack or Sensei's Divining Top, where you can fix the top card of your library, you can play him and guarantee that you're going to get a land drop. What's nice is when he enters the battlefield, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it onto the battlefield so it comes in untapped. Otherwise, you put it into your hand. So you can, with Sensei's Top, essentially fix that you get an extra land drop. Hope of Gurapur. This card I include mostly because it's just a 1 colorless drop. So either he's quick ramp for Animar. If Animar has any counters on him, he's a free counter. Not to mention he's a flyer. Flying is definitely a weakness of this deck. And so he gives you a little bit of defense in the air, not to mention if you can actually swing and deal damage to somebody, you can trigger him, sack him, and then your opponent can't cast non-creature spells during their turn. Ancestral Statue. This guy is clutch for this deck. So, Ancestral Statue, when he enters the battlefield, return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. So basically, on cast, Animar gets a counter, Ancestral Statue hits the battlefield, and then you can target Ancestral Statue with its own ability and bounce it back to your hand. So this will give Animar infinite 1/1 counters. If you're just 1v1, you can swing in with an infinite Animar and just kill somebody with commander damage. Aside from that, mixed with Cloudstone Curio, that automatically generates that Eldrazi bounce or that heavy creature bounce, mixed with Paradox Engine and any type of mana rocks. It's infinite mana. You get a lot of utility out of this card. It's why you run Fabricate and Worldly Tutor, mostly to tutor up Ancestral Statue. Then we have Fauna Shaman, again, tutor on a stick. You do have to discard creatures, but that's okay. You're looking for win con. Primordial Hydra, just a really big Hydra. That's really what it comes down to.
Just a big old fat fatty.
I mean, if for whatever reason you're starved of colors and you have him, you can play him on turn 3 for 1 and just watch him double. If you get Simic Ascendancy out, you can easily pop Simic with just Primordial Hydra. Not to mention he becomes a problem very, very fast, the table has to deal with him.
And it's funny because he'll come out as like a 1/1 or a 2/2, and it's like, oh, okay, I'll deal with that later. And the next thing you know, he's a 30/30, and you're like, oh, this has gotten out of hand very quickly.
Very quickly. All right, then we have Genesis Hydra. This guy mixed with Paradox Engine, Ancestral Statue with an infinite Animar. He can basically let you just search for any card in your deck. So when you cast Genesis Hydra, reveal the top X cards of your library. So if Animar has gone infinite, that means you can search your entire library. You may put a non-land permanent card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So you can put a card that costs infinite mana onto the battlefield or less. So basically you can search your library for any card and put it onto the battlefield. So mixed with Paradox Engine and Cloudstone Curio, you can pretty much just
put every creature.
Tutor every creature. Yeah. And tutor any enchantment, any artifact.
And I mean, it's pretty easy too, because you can pretty much, on the first try, you can just tutor up Ancestral Statue.
This is after Ancestral Statue.
Oh, gotcha.
That's the idea. Not to mention, but as Dakota said, if you don't have the pieces, don't hold back and not play him, because you can always search through your deck, dig deeper into your deck, and maybe find an answer. Reclamation Sage, super quick, fairly cheap, destroys a target artifact or enchantment. He's just removal. You need answers in this deck, let's be real. We're playing to win. Disruptive Student, probably one of my favorite cards just for the flavor.
God, he's so ugly.
3-drop,
so
counter.
Fucking ugly.
Yeah. I mean, it's... Yeah.
Like, Teferi went from this goblin-looking little fucker to this Denzel Washington just gorgeous man. In a super heterosexual way.
Right. Counter target spell unless its caster pays an additional 1. Play this ability as an interrupt. So he's awesome because you then just watch for when people don't have mana to tap, and then you can just tap him. Again, mixed with Paradox Engine, he can be real fun. You can just make people tap out all their mana, or they can't cast anything. Rajmi, Eternity's Crafter. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than that spell's, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast the revealed card, put it into your hand. So Rajmi mixed with Leyline of Anticipation. Since it's first spell each turn, you can actually trigger on your opponent's turns and get a free cast. Since it's cast, that means it will trigger Animar's ability if you're casting creature spells.
Nice.
Sad Robot, Solemn Simulacron, just super good for, again, color fixing, and card draw. Deep Glow is super useful, especially with the with Animar, with the Hydras, and with the Planeswalkers. When Deep Glow Skate enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. So, yeah, he's just good for getting Animar bigger. And what's nice about Deep Glow is if you have to, Animar has no counters on him, and you only have Deep Glow. You can cast Deep Glow, trigger, Animar gets a counter, Deep Glow enters the battlefield, doubles the amount of counters. So minimal, Animar will get 2 counters from Deep Glow Skate. We run all of the Praetors in the 3 colors.
Yeah, you do.
So we have Urbask, of course, gives haste, makes opponent's creatures come in tapped. Peregrine Drake, he's just useful at any stage because of his ability to untap up to 5 of your lands. I also run Deadeye Navigator, which is mixed with Peregrine Drake, infinite mana. We run Steel Hellkite. He's just 6 colorless, which means Animar can potentially cast him for free. Aside from that, he's really mean. He's really good at clearing out tokens because of his X ability, which is destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. Basically, that means you hit somebody with Steel Hellkite, a token deck, for example, you pay no mana, all their tokens die because tokens have a converted mana cost of 0.
And also with that infinite mana combo that he just talked about, that fire breathing, that colorless dragon artifact fire breathing, you could just
snipe
win.
Somebody.
Yep, just snipe someone out of the game.
Draining Welk. You love Draining Welk, right?
Oh god, Draining Welk.
Yeah. This is the only quote-unquote counter spell I run, and it's a goddamn creature. So Flash Flying, when Draining Welk comes into play, counter target spell, put X 1/1 counters on Draining Welk, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. He does cost quote-unquote 6, but again, if Animar's big, somebody's trying to take out Animar.
As a counter spell.
Oh, Flash, fuck you and your X cost spell.
And it's so unexpected, too, because it's a 6-cost creature.
Yeah.
Every time it happens, you're like, wait, what is that? And then you're like, God damn it. Okay.
Of course, we have Deadeye Navigator. He can Soulbond, which means Soul Bond, which when he enters, you choose another permanent. And then as long as he's paired with another creature, each of those creatures has, for 2 mana, exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. It's a flicker effect, which mixed with the Drake that lets you untap mana, creates infinite mana. You could also use him with any of the other creatures. Very just useful card for a lot of situations. Get creative with him. Oblivion Sower, he's one of the key Eldrazi for just milling out your opponents. When he enters the battlefield, or when you cast him, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of his or her library. Then you may put any number of land cards that player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. So not only do you mill somebody, but you take all their lands, and before they leave the game, you can tap them for mana. Vigor, God, he has been clutch for me so many times.
Yeah.
If damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage. Put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. When Vigor is put into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So not only does he not stay in the graveyard, but mixed with Leyline of Anticipation, he's an answer for any type of like aggro board wipe that's like deal 13 damage to everything or anything like that. It's like, okay, well, in response, I'm going to flash in Vigor and all my creatures are going to go up by a shit 30. Ton. Yeah. Platinum Angel, of course, just colorless, so potential free drop, not to mention you can't lose the game. Avenger of Zendikar, I've won with him several times just because this deck can ramp fairly quickly. Land drops are fairly common, so the plants can get ramped up, not to mention with Doubling Season, Hardened Scales, Deep Glow Skate. It's very easy to ramp up Avenger of Zendikar's plants, of course, so when he enters the battlefield, you put a 0/1 plant creature token for each land that you control, and then whenever a land enters after that, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of those plants. So if you play him for his full cost, so 7, you get 7 plants. And then if you play a fetch land, sack it, search for another land, you have 7 2/3s immediately. And if you have any kind of haste mechanic, that's a quick 14 damage. Keterek Leviathan, he has saved my ass so many times, just because he's like Cyclonic Rift, but in creature form. Mm-hmm. His Unearth ability is super useful too. You don't have to worry about discarding him or dumping him into your graveyard, but because you can just unearth him. Craterhoof Behemoth, of course I run Craterhoof.
Yeah,
He can be win con.
Absolutely.
Again, haste. When he enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Yeah, one hit.
Avenger of Zendikar.
Yeah.
Friggin' cast
exactly.
Get all those plants.
Super
Death by plants.
Death by plants.
I think you have Death by squirrels in here too.
No, not this deck.
Oh, not this one. Oh no, that's elves.
Yeah. not elves. It's tribal token.
Gotcha. Not
right.
Tribal elves. You're right.
Here's the next Praetor. We have Vorinclex. So
and if your playgroup doesn't let you play Vorinclex, you tell your playgroup they're a bunch of pussies.
They really are. Like, deal with it.
Yeah.
Basically, he doubles your mana.
Get good.
And he winter orbs your opponents, basically. What I learned about Vorinclex from GP is even after he leaves the battlefield, that mana remains sticky. So you even get value after he leaves the field. Super mean. Stonehood Chieftain, big stompy, again, potentially just 1 green to cast, but trample indestructible, and whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains trample and indestructible. It's really important for this deck to have trample, especially Animar, since he doesn't come with trample. So anything you can do to give Animar trample, especially if he's gone infinite, it wins you the game. Platinum Empyrean, your life total can't change. I don't think that needs any more explanation.
Yeah.
Terestodon, this is answer. You can blow up mana sources. When he
I
enters the battlefield,
3
you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. That's huge. Super easy to cast with Animar, and you can shut somebody's mana down. Especially if you get him out early. I've almost lost friends playing this card.
It's super good. I hate it, but it's so good.
Here's the last Praetor, probably my favorite.
Another
Jin
one. Yep.
Cataxis, the Core Augur. Flash at the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Just super useful for controlling everybody's hand. Not to mention, if you have Reliquary Tower in play, you don't have to worry about discarding stuff, but who cares? You're digging into your deck, so it just filters.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get into the fun, big stompy cards. So we have Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. So when you cast him, you exile 2 target permanents. That's not a May. Very, very important that you notice that. Apart from that, he's indestructible, so fairly hard to deal with. If you can play him with a Chroma's Memorial in play when he comes in with haste, you can immediately exile the top 20 cards of somebody's library. This guy is so mean. I have felt bad attacking people with him, but he's clutch in this deck. Yeah. We have Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Super good because when you cast him, so even if he gets countered, you still get to draw 4 cards. Aside from that, Annihilator 4. And then when he enters the graveyard, you can shuffle your library back into your graveyard. So a lot of times, if you have to discard a card, he's not a bad go-to. Then we have Void Winnower, or as we like to say, can't even. Your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana cost. Your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana cost. And it has subtext 0 is even. Just really good board state control. Last but not least, we have Emrakul, the Promised End. So he costs, well, we don't really care about his cost.
He costs free.
He basically, yeah. But when he enters, you gain control. When you cast him, you gain control of target opponents. You gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. Meaning you get to take their turn, and then they get to take a turn after you take their turn. Not to mention Flying Trample and Protection from Instants. Him mixed with Cloudstone Curio will make people very angry at you.
Mm-hmm. Like Andrew.
Not to mention if you can do a bounce, take somebody's turn for them, and then go immediately to end step and discard all of their rocks. That's a really good move.
Oh god, it's so good.
Or if you can take over somebody's turn who has Toxic Deluge, they then lose the game.
Yep.
Anyway, those are the creatures. Yeah.
So Andrew, tell us about the last time you interacted with Emrakul, the Promised End.
Oh, you mean where Justin took 7 of my turns in a row, did nothing with it, aside from discarding my hand? 10 out of 10. Would do it again.
All right, so whopping. I think that was pretty good. We cut it down to about 20 minutes total for the whole deck tech.
That's ambitious.
Yeah. All right, so talk to us about the win cons.
Okay, so, well, the main idea would be getting Ancestral out, Ancestral Statue with Animar.
Plan A. Yeah,
That's
always
plan A. Yeah, with either Impact Tremors for insta-win, or Simic Ascendancy for a slightly slower win.
Yeah, so getting Ancestral Statue out, casting him for free, Impact Tremors, just casting and casting and casting until your opponent dies.
Now,
it's a great plan A.
You do need to realize if you're dry casting Ancestral Statue with Animar on the field, meaning Animar has 0 counters,
Yep.
you have to cast him for 4, then you have to cast him for 3, then 2, then 1. I'm no mathematician, but I believe that's 10 mana. So just keep that in mind. You really want Animar to have at least 2 counters before you start casting Ancestral Statue.
I'm so glad you knew that was 10. I was sitting here for I still had no idea. I'm stupid, folks. I know muscles. I don't know numbers.
Oh, God.
All right, so that fails. What do we go to next?
Okay, so that should fail. If you're playing with a competitive group, they shouldn't let you do that. If that fails, we have lots of answers. My next is to get into kind of the utility side, which is Deadeye Navigator mixed with either Draining Whelk, which basically is counter spells on a stick.
Yeah.
Peregrine Drake, which is infinite mana. If you have Peregrine Drake and Deadeye with Draining Whelk, then that's infinite mana, infinite counters. If you have Deep Glow, if you add Deep Glow to the mix, then you're just doubling Animar's counters over and over again every time he enters the battlefield. Reclamation Sage just means you nuke every single enchantment and artifact on the table that you want gone. And
So
then
basically board lock.
Coiling
is-
Oracle will literally let you draw as many cards as you want and play all the lands,
Okay.
mixed with Peregrine Drake and Deadeye Navigator.
Okay.
So if you can't figure anything out with those on the board, then you shouldn't be playing Magic. You should just quit. Aside from that, then we move on to our Cloudstone Curio combos. This is where all of the Eldrazi. Now, it's very important that you remember Cloudstone Curio does not work on artifacts. It has to be a non-artifact permanent, meaning big weakness is Micros Inflatus, since that turns everything into an artifact. So just be wary of that. Also, the other colorless cards I have in my deck that aren't splayed out here are artifact creatures, so they will not trigger Cloudstone Curio. Ancestral Statue is the only exception because when it enters, you just
He has his own
return.
ability.
Yeah. So that's kind of a little weird way around it. But aside from that, you have Ulamog, Kozilek. You have to be careful bouncing those two since when you cast them, Ulamog, it's not a May ability. You have to exile 2 permanents, and Kozilek, you have to draw 4 cards. So you could easily screw up your own board state that way.
Mm-hmm.
But Emrakul, very safe to bounce. Just keep taking people's turns. Void Winter,
right,
no
Andrew?
consequences to recasting him, but Oblivion Sower is key. That's the one that you really want to be bouncing since he can exile 4 cards from a library. So you can literally just mill out everybody with Oblivion Sower. Genesis Hydra, it's not infinite with Genesis Hydra and Cloudstone unless you have a way of untapping colored mana. Just because he will cost you 2 green to cast, but a lot of times you can cast him, put creatures into the field, they enter, bounce them back to your hand, so you can tutor up a lot of stuff, at least, with him to get.
Yeah, and like
the
you were
ball
saying
rolling.
earlier, you can just, if like, best case scenario, you can just dump your entire library of creatures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially if you have Paradox Engine and any number of
Oh yeah, rocks.
rocks
Absolutely.
or dorks.
Yeah.
Not to mention Cryptolith Right. It's super good. 2 cost, and all your creatures have the ability to tap for mana mixed with Paradox Engine. That basically lets Genesis Hydra bounce with Cloudstone as many times as you want.
So again, as always with all of our decks, this is just one way to build this deck. Obviously, we think it's the best way
Well,
that you could
I've
probably
been
build it.
tuning it. It hasn't stayed the same in a long time.
Yeah.
It's always evolving, always changing. This I originally built back in 2016, and I think on Tapped Out, which we should have a link for.
Yeah, I'll have
Yeah.
a link for the tap out.
So you'll be able to see the whole deck listing and whatnot. But it's made a lot of changes since I first built it.
He went full colorless Eldrazi,
Yeah,
and that was interesting.
It didn't work as well as I was hoping for, but when it did work, it was brutal.
What was the biggest thing that made you want to stick with this version rather than... Because I'm assuming when most people see Animar, they think Eldrazi.
Yes.
So what was the main thing that made you shift away from colorless Eldrazi?
Well, it's because Animar comes with 3 colors, and I wasn't utilizing those 3 colors. Like the ramp, the ability to get mana, the ability to do shenanigans with all the blue creatures.
Yeah.
You really want to play into those 3 colors, and you realize there's more to Animar than just free casting creatures.
Going colorless, you're really kind of just bringing down the ceiling of what the deck's potential is.
Yeah, and it becomes more a one-trick pony, where, oh, well, you beat my win con.
Well, shit.
Guess
I'm
I'm
just
just
gonna
gonna
sit here and draw till someone else wins.
Wait.
So again, one thing that I feel sets this show apart against any other one is we all like to think that our decks are unbeatable and it's the perfect deck, but we've all got something that as soon as you see it hit the battlefield on the other side, you're like, fuck, man,
Yeah.
I am just screwed. So let's talk about that for Animar.
Alright, so biggest problems that I've run into with Animar is it's not going to be a turn 3 win. So 1v1, it's not going to pull its weight, especially against combo decks, stack decks. It does not run that many counter spells, so I try to run as many answers as I can, but there's only so much you can do. It pretty much counts on being in a 4-man pod where you have 3 other people trying to control the board, and it's really about that mid-game, which I found is where you want to be in the competitive scene, especially if you're playing 4-man pods. 1v1, it's not going to hold up. That being said, another big weakness it has is any card like Blood Moon, or I've had games where Contamination or Blood Moon or something like that, I couldn't draw into basics. All I could draw into were non-basics. So I just have a bunch of reds, and I'm just praying that somebody else at the table can deal with it. And as soon as it happens, of Of course, I started with a ley line of anticipation, so I just flash Animar in and just...
I think that actually happened the other night.
Yes.
We were playing a game against a mono red, and he played Blood Moon, and as soon as I killed Blood Moon, he was like, "Sweet, I win."
And of course, anything that plays a lot of creature hate, anything that restricts tutoring, I do tutor quite a bit.
Solemnity. Just like my
Solemnity
Mazarek
yeah,
deck.
Solemnity just
Snip those nuts,
shuts
man.
down
Snips
Animar
them nuts.
hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, early game, it can't deal with stuff super well early game like Smokestack. If somebody gets a Smokestack out turn 2 and gets that pumping,
not a lot of token generation. Usually whatever is out on the battlefield is a key component for you.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so in the eyes of the person that is looking at you playing your Animar deck, I have a lot of experience playing against this deck, and the biggest thing that's probably going to be in your to-do list, your number one on your to-do list, is just get rid of Animar or stop the counters from happening. Really keeping Animar either in check or off the battlefield is usually my main goal whenever he gets this going, and really just getting to it before, just getting to my win con before he can get to his. If an Animar deck tutors up for an ancestral statue, I'm gonna say this again, if an Animar deck tutors up an ancestral statue, have a counter ready, because once it's on the battlefield, removal isn't gonna do shit. Exiling isn't going to do shit because he can just bounce it back to his hand. Have a counter spell ready. Because if Ancestral Statue hits the battlefield, that's game over, man. It's game over. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Pumped Up Gaming. Hopefully I'm going to try to get this one. I'm gonna go back and say 40 minutes. I'm going to cut 11 minutes off the last one because the deck tech, this one was really good with the in-depth stuff for someone that's really just trying to get into Animar. And I hope you guys are just really just enjoying the show. I mean, we're having a blast shooting it for you and just talking about Magic cards. So
yeah, and again, if you want to start off playing Animar, like you can use this as an outline, but don't feel like the deck won't work if you don't have all the same creatures I have. Again, make it your own. This is just a way to get started, some good ideas for certain combos. A lot of those key pieces aren't that expensive. Honestly, the expensive
Ancestral Statue is what, $3 for the foil?
Well, no, the foil was $7.
Oh, yeah.
But that's because non-foil's like 40 cents, and they don't sell those at
any
major
vendor. You can really, like we were talking about earlier, you can take it anywhere. I mean, you could do Elemental Tribal. You could do Eldrazi Tribal.
Anamorph.
Yeah, Animar Anamorphs is a popular one. I'm not super familiar with any other ones, but yeah, this one is a super diverse deck for you to build it really any way that you want. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. As always, I'm up to 15 subscribers, killing it. So if you guys enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. And yeah, so again, we got Justin here. I'm Dakota, and this is Pumped Up Gaming.
Also not sponsored by It Works, but it works.
We'll see you guys in the next one.